Hi, my name is Amanda Eveler. I'm the Financial Literacy Caseworker here at Blueprints. This is lesson 3 of the 5-set series, building a budget. If you haven't done any of them, your first one's going to be building skills for financial confidence, and then goal setting is after that one, which is one before this. So if you're tagging along, as you remember from goal setting, we talked about filling out the action planning, assessing where you were, and prioritizing those goals based upon your values and needs. So today we're going to be talking about building a budget. So it's going to be kind of talking about what a budget is, how you do it, and I'm going to give you an example of how to fill it in. Okay, so building a better budget. So what is a budget? So a budget is the overall estimate of income and expenditures for a set period of time, typically tracked on paper or digitally, some kind of way of keeping track of everything. It allows people to stay on track and learn good habits with their spending their money, and just an overall realm of different things. So income is going to be what you bring in. So that's one of the 3 parts of a budget is going to be your income. So this includes things from a job, things from side jobs you may do if you have multiple jobs, even things like benefits that you collect. So if you're a SNAP recipient or HUD recipient or any kind of benefit, cash benefit, anything that comes in, that is considered income. Expenses, there's 2 different kinds. So fixed expenses are things that don't change. So these are things typically like your rent, your car payment, insurance. Most of those things don't change from month to month to month when you pay them. So it's a fixed expense. You know how much it's going to be. Flexible expenses, however, are things that change generally from the first payment to the next time to the next time. So these are things like gas, if you spend money for transportation at all. Food, you typically probably spend different amounts of money at the grocery store each time. This is things like maybe your electric bill fluctuates every month, just things like that. So it's things that are money that you're paying, but it's a different expense and different value each time you pay it. And then the last part is disposable income. So this is any money that's left over in your budget at the end of the month. So it's whatever money you didn't spend on expenses and you brought in from your income. So when you're creating a budget, it's important to find a budget tool that works for you. I personally like to use a budget that's digital. I can access it anywhere because I'm constantly on the go. I'm very busy and I'm always, with different people at different times. Some people typically like to use a budgeting book, which is they can write everything down. That's a great way too. Some people use just paper that they write everything down and it's how they scratch everything down. Some people use binders, folders, etc. that have pockets in them with certain bills you can put in there, super organized. There's so many different budgeting tools that you can use. For what I'm going to show you today, it's going to be actually an Excel sheet that I have created. And it's linked up to a list of categories that I also have worked on creating and putting together. So that's typically what I use. It can be accessed online or it can be printed out and used month to month. It just depends upon the person that I'm working with. Typically, I have them use it in paper, so when they bring it to my office, I can also see it as well. So identify and list your income. So like I said, this is things that come from employment benefits. If you get monthly stipends, maybe because you babysit someone's kid twice a month, whatever, you want to make sure you're considering those things. Important things that a lot of people miss out on are, again, the food stamps, the SNAP benefits programs. If you receive WIC dollars or WIC money, that's also important to include. If you collect disability at all or Social Security, that's important to add in your income. If you receive a housing stipend, anything like that that's coming in, that's money that's helping you, you want to make sure you include those. This can also be things from side jobs, birthdays, Christmas, if you receive money monthly, just from like help from friends or family or whatever it may be. The third thing is set boundaries or goals per area of the budget sheet for spending. So typically when you're starting your budget for the first time, you want to kind of set a generalized goal of how much you plan to spend on each area. This kind of helps you maybe track along the way and watch where you're spending money, but it also kind of helps you make your budget from whatever your income total is supposed to be at the top to work the whole way through that. So typically the fixed expenses, as I talked about in the beginning, those should all be set expenses on your thing. Whereas the flexible one, that's where you have to be creative and kind of make a generalized idea of how much you want to spend in that area. And you want to make sure that your total income that you list at the top is equal to the boundaries and goals that you're setting throughout your entire budget. So when you add up everything in the categories section of what your goal is to spend on them, you want it to either be equal to or less than the amount that's listed at the top from income. So the next steps can be track and record all expenses and spending. So even if you spend $1 at the gas station because you pick up a candy bar, or you spend $5 at McDonald's once a week, or whatever it may be, it's important to track those. And I will explain why when we're going through that. But you want to track every little cent that you're spending to the T. People that round up, that's great. It helps you kind of keep more in track of things. But it's important to make sure that you're not saying like $15 if it's $15.25. You want to make sure you're including that 25 cents because those small cent amounts also add up as well. And then calculate your income versus expenses. So once at the end of the month, you have filled in your entire budget sheet, you've been honest and true to it, you've written down every little thing, you've kept every receipt, whatever you choose to do, you want to make sure you're calculating how much. So it's also important to look at your income as well that you have each month, and look at how much you brought in that month. Because for people that are paid hourly and their hours fluctuate, your budget's going to change a lot differently than someone who's paid salary and their paychecks are the same. So when you're looking at those income differences, you want to get like more of an average generalized information for how much you're spending than to go off of a week that you might have had a lot of hours or a week that you might not have had any hours. So it's important to calculate that as well and keep track of that, as well as your expenses. So look at those goals that you set for yourself. If you set your goal to be $200 for groceries and you spend $260, you want to evaluate where you went wrong and when you started spending money significantly, or maybe just when you were spending money in general and seeing the patterns of things. And then evaluate the differences of what your goals were and what your actuals were. If you had positive money at the end of the month, good for you. Like you managed your budget, you stuck to those goals and really kept a hold of their spending. If it was in the negative, that's where you start to evaluate and move forward of setting those goals that we talked about in the beginning, maybe even setting new goals. So for example, when we talked about setting goals last time, we talked about those wants versus needs a little bit, and we talked about how the immediate needs are things that need to be met. So if you're paying for Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all these different streaming services or subscription services, and you're spending $50 more in food than you expect to, maybe cutting back on some of those expenses and those subscriptions and things that aren't necessarily needs might help you accommodate for those different things so you can start seeing that positive dollar sign at the end of the month. So I'm going to show you how we're going to go through a budget. I'm going to show you a budget sheet. I'm going to explain everything on it, and then I'm just going to kind of show like how you can do all of these steps throughout the budget. Okay, so as you can see, there's a budget sheet on the screen. So what I'm gonna do first is go through those steps. So the first step was to find the tool that you want to use. This is the tool that I use, and you can see the categories listed on the side. I do have a breakdown for people that I have as clients that kind of explains a little bit more about what goes each in those categories. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my income up here. So total income, you can do it weekly. If you're paid weekly and you're hourly, that's great. You can do it weekly if you'd rather do that. Or if you know more what you want to do, I typically just put my total up here in this box up here, and I will just put the total amount that I make for that week right here. So I'll insert that up at the top. And this also includes things, there's multiple dollar signs as you can see for if you receive those benefits and other things that we talked about. The next is going to be to list the expenses goals. So all of these down here. So for example, housing, and I typically just put it at the first one. It doesn't really matter exactly what day it is, but if you know how much your rent is or your mortgage or whatever it is, you're going to put that money amount right here. Utilities. So this is where it kind of gets difficulty, where those flexible expenses come in. So if you typically spend about $50 in electric bills, you're going to want to write $50. but you want to make sure you're including the total for all utilities. So if you have multiple utilities you pay for, so say you pay for water, electric, and gas, you're going to want to fill those in separately here, and you're going to want to keep track of those and set the goals for those. Typically, you should not kind of know about how much you spend on each of those if they're not a fixed price, but it's important to kind of just make sure you're putting every single utility as a separate cost on there and not just putting like $80 for all 5 whatever amount of utilities that you pay. The next one is so you're going to do that for all of these down through for the ones that are relevant to you. So, and I say that because if you have children, if you don't have, if you do have children, it's going to be relevant to put things for your kids in there. If you don't have children, obviously that's not going to be an effect to you. Things like clothing, that's not necessarily a need for everyone every month. Some people, coming up to back to school, that's going to be something that they put in their budget more frequently, or like Christmas time, whereas it's not going to be maybe for some of those other months. Things like subscriptions, if you don't have any, it's not going to be relevant for you. Same with pets and giving. So it kind of just depends based upon your own preference and what you do for your own personal budget and how you fill that in. So the last thing is going to be the other things. So calculating the expenses. So at the top, you can obviously do the math. You just put it up here, how much is here, and then you'll put the total over here, planned, and then difference. And that's here. So if you are someone who's hourly and you plan to have a bigger amount of money this month than you did, you can put the differences of what you made. So you can kind of adjust your budget that way as well. So once you go through the entire month, you'll go through all these days and type in the amount of numbers. And then over here, you'll do your total, planned, and difference. So the planned is going to be what you choose to spend money on. So how I said you put 3 different expenses for your 3 different utilities that you pay, you'll add those up and put that actual total number over here. But it's important to make sure you track how much you wanted to plan on spending for those utilities somewhere else so that you can see it, because electric can fluctuate in winter months and summer months. So it's important to kind of see how much you really are spending, and so you can help adjust maybe to those utilities and specific utilities themselves. So you'll do that for every single category. You'll go through, write down the planned, you'll write down the total that you spend, and then you'll write down the difference. Hopefully it's positive or negatives that you spend different. So hopefully you had more money left over in those categories than you did. So then at the bottom, you'll see you've filled in all your information, total outgo. So down here is where you're going to really put, the total overall. So you're going to add up all of these totals to equal one total number. You're going to add up all of these planned to equal one total number. And then you're going to add up the differences to equal one total number. So up here, you'll get the total income that you planned on having. So you'll just transfer that down. You'll put the total that you had. So at the bottom down here, it'll be how much total you spent, how much you would plan to spend, and what the difference is, and that's where you'll find that positive or negative number. So just to show you a little bit of an example, I'm going to just fill in some numbers, do some math for it, and we're just gonna kind of just see how it goes. So let's say I'm salary based and I make $800 a month in my salary. Or I'm sorry, I lied. I make $1,200 a month in my salary. My housing is $600. I know that. Oh, I don't know why that says small. I apologize. All right. Well, it says 600. And then utilities, I plan 50 for one, and I only pay 30 for the other. Food, let's say I spend $200 in food a month. Transportation, I don't pay anything because I get free rides. None of these are really relevant to me. House supplies, so maybe I spend $10 on toilet paper and everything else I need this month. And so on and so forth. So then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add all these numbers together and do the math. And hopefully it equals to or is less than the $1,200 value that I set myself at. So that's just how you fill it in. You can do the math along the way, just different things like that. The other important thing that I wanted to touch base on and kind of talk about just to wrap up budgeting. So when you are filling in those goals, you want to make it as close to the total income that you think you're going to have or you're going to have. So that way you're not really leaving a margin of error. And I say that because you're not really being realistic if you don't set boundaries to stay, pretty significantly close in your budget, especially for the beginning times. That's going to be really important to figure out. So it's important to kind of stick to those and follow through with those. And then the last thing, just for budgeting, when things fluctuate in your budget, so for example, car expenses or emergencies that happen, those are going to be where you're going to have your budget all over the place and all kinds of different changes in your budget, and you're going to have to reevaluate those budgets. So it's important that you are kind of working your way to having that disposable income each month. So that way, when things like that happen, you're not depleting your bank account, and you're also not kind of getting stuck in that web of trying to get out of that negative in your budget. So that's why you want to aim to have less than what you plan. So that way you can see that change in the dollars and things like that. So the next category that we're going to talk about, the next class, is maximizing income. So it's going to come straight off of dealing with the budget and dealing with the budget sheet and planning out your own budget. So it's going to talk about like the spending, the tracking of spending, how you can be kind of a smart shopper with certain things. We're going to cover a whole bunch of different things with maximizing income, more than just thinking about adding income to your income. So if you have any questions, again, you can reach out to us, email me, whatever you are comfortable with. If you want more resources and tools, I would be more than willing to work with you and try to help you through that. And then stay tuned for class number 4, which is going to be maximizing income.